a garage in Orange County, Daniel Jensen set out to build drums that didn't exist, an approach that eventually caught the attention of Adrian Young of No Doubt and grew into something much bigger. In this episode, they share the stories behind those early days, how it started, and how it all came together. This is the Fully Vented Podcast. Now here's your host, Jared Fallon.
Today's episode starts in a place that doesn't get talked about enough, a 3-car garage in Orange County. Before Orange County Drum and Percussion was a name, a logo, or a sound people recognized around the world, it was Daniel Jensen building drums in his garage. And as those drums started to leave that garage and make their way into the world, one of the drummers who helped carry that sound onto stages everywhere was Adrian Young. Not just as an artist, but as someone who believed in O.C.D.P. deeply enough to become part of the company itself. What makes today special is that we're not telling the story just from one angle. We've got the builder who was there at the beginning and the drummer who brought those drums to a global audience, both in the room at the same time. This isn't about nostalgia or specs. It's about how a garage-built idea turned into a defining chapter in modern drum history. Daniel Jensen, Adrian Young, this is Fully Vented. But yeah, if you guys are ready, we can just kind of dive in and just we'll get rolling. But so yeah, this question, well, one, thank you for being here. This is so cool. We appreciate it and excited to get this going. But going back, we want to know, when did you guys start playing drums? This goes for both of you. When did you guys start playing drums, and who were some of your influences?
12. I was definitely of the era of the Tommy Lee. 11-year-old, 12-year-old Daniel was definitely a Motley Crue fan, and Tommy Lee definitely had, the most stuff that was definitely on my, it definitely caught my attention as a kid. As a matter of fact, what really got me into wanting to make drums and custom drums was that there's actually a snare drum. If you look in the Home Sweet Home video, it's a shot from the side of Tommy, and it's a 12x14 sonar, and it has black and red stripes on it like that. And I was like, whoa, look at that drum. Like, I've never seen anything like that. And it was like, oh man, I'd love to do something like that. And of course, I'd go to, drum stores, and nobody had anything like that. And Sonar had made Tommy 2 of those. And ironically enough, maybe 2 months ago, one of the 2 came up on Reverb, and Travis bought it. So we now have it. We now have it in the studio. And I was telling him the story. I'm like, that's what inspired me to originally want to start doing stuff in the first place, and then would have been the Girls tour, which was with the spinning drum kit. It was pearl and it was chrome, but it had red transparent powder coating on it, so it looked red chrome. And at that point, you got to remember, drums were, your dad's drums or your grandfather's drums. It was a very sterile, hey, we're getting wild. We got white marine pearl. We got black. We got this. Yeah. Everything was very bland. And I was like, man, I wanted cool stuff like that, and nobody had it. And it was what drove me to want to make stuff that didn't exist. So
right on. And what about you, Adrian?
Well, in junior high school, I was playing trombone for the first semester, and then an opening came up to play snare drum for the second semester. So I did that, but I wasn't really drumming yet. I hadn't played a drum set, and I didn't carry on. But I always wanted to play. In my mind, that's what I wanted to be doing. And I couldn't afford a drum set. And then finally, senior year of high school, I was already 18 at this point. My parents surprised me with a drum set for Christmas. And so that's really when I started.
Do you remember what that kit was?
Yeah, it was it had no bottom heads. It was wood. They probably bought it in Recycler magazine.
The good old Recycler.
And it wasn't a brand name. It was probably some kit that a guy had, restained himself. I think he in Marks a Lot wrote his name on each shell. And Yeah, I played
So
that.
it had no bottom heads. Was it concert toms, or did it just not have rims?
It just didn't have bottom heads. It looked like some
Very,
70s
very-
kit.
Yeah, I was gonna say some very common. Like,
Yeah.
I lost all the bottom parts of the stuff, and now it's a concert tom.
Yeah. And then I played that until I bought my first Guitar Center drum set, which was a Tama Rockstar white, right after I got No Doubt. Right before I got No Doubt, I bought that.
Okay. And
Very
Daniel.
popular drum kit.
Yeah.
There's a-
Sounded like shit.
My first drum kit I got from my drum teacher. He also sold some stuff, and it was a company, a Taiwanese import company called Kima, which was like a CB700. Do you remember those?
Yeah.
So that was my first one, and it was black. And I tried to make it look as cool as I could. As I said, it was so bland that, I was trying to at least make it black on black, get some heads, try to make it cooler than it was. And it was a 5-piece, everybody. And then you add your rototoms, especially at that time, because, you're trying to make that kit look bigger and cooler. And it would have definitely had that. But my first real drum kit would be a white double bass Ludwig kit after once I finally got that.
Say that's how you do it. Yeah.
Break down the hammer.
I mean, it was,
I just had a memory about that first drum set because the snare drum that came with it was, I didn't know it at the time, but it was a bitchin', probably 70s or 60s. It was probably a Superphonic.
probably. I mean, that was
something
such
was
an
really
industry
cool.
standard.
My parents didn't even know how cool this thing was, and I didn't know how cool it was. And then I joined a heavy metal band.
See?
And they were like, you got to get a new drum set. That's why I went to Guitar Center to get that Tama Rockstar.
You're like, Rockstar, the whole thing. And
I
that's the
had
name
to-
written right on it.
I had to trade in the Ludwig snare to have enough money to get the Tama Rockstar. And, there it goes.
'Cause, I mean,
I didn't
that-
even know how good
Famous
that
last
snare
words.
was.
Yeah.
The snare drum today is probably worth more than, if it was, spread from the year and the whole deal.
Or you could be like me and just spray paint black a blue Vistalite because, I didn't know what it was.
There's that. I mean, I've
Yeah.
definitely come across a lot of, people would rap over on a Vistalite.
The
or,
neighbor gave it to me, and I'm like, I want what Travis wants. I'm like, dude, he's not fucking playing that. So I'm like, rattle can it was,
I saw a lot of kids ruin some really nice drums, fucking cutting holes in them that should never have been cut.
Yeah, we said that Orange County, on top of, making some of the greatest drums, you guys are responsible for fucking up the most drums.
Inspired a lot of people to fuck up their drum kits. Yeah, there was definitely a lot of kids with a lot of, logo heads that were not, that everybody wanted the 2 holes in the front, and they would put that on, anything they had to mimic it. But it's,
In regards to inspiration, what were some of the bands or music you guys were growing up or listening to?
Well, I'll loop some of the drummers into this. I grew up a rock and roll kid in a rock and roll family. So in the 70s in my house, it was Hendrix, Janis Joplin, The Doors, Bob Marley and the Wailers, Zeppelin, Deep Purple. Those are the records that were constantly being played in my house. And so, of course, Ian Pace was kind of the first guy where I'm like, this is amazing. Whatever he's doing is just speaking to me. And then in later years, when I started to get more into new wave and punk and ska, it was some of the obvious ones, Stuart Copeland, Fish from Fishbone, Neil Peart, of course. Yeah.
No, good choices. Can't go wrong. What about you, Daniel?
I grew up I was into a lot of like metal bands when I was a kid. I mean, I had, hair down to here for, a long time. So it was definitely my world. But drummer wise, I mean, there were those guys who I appreciated, all the metal guys and, the hard rock, drummers. But I mean, I love Stuart Copeland and I love John Bonham and Mitch Mitchell, guys like that. I thought were, playing stuff that was definitely different and, had their own flavor and their own vibe versus, a lot of guys who were just copying the same thing from, other drummers.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
So that would be my vibe.
All right. So Adrian, when did you first hear about No Doubt?
Pretty much when the band started. So, I mean, I guess it would have been 1987. My friends and I would go to a lot of punk and ska shows at Fender's Ballroom in downtown Long Beach.
Good old Fenders.
Yeah. And we went to see, it was either Fishbone or the Untouchables, and one of the opening bands was No Doubt. And I was instantly in love with the band and just, started going to all their shows locally. And I know what your next question is going to be, so I'll just go right into it.
Absolutely. Did you check out the cue cards ahead of time?
So and I started becoming friends with people that kind of hung around the band, but I didn't really know the band at this point, except for, well, that's not true. I did call the number on the back of a cassette that I bought at one of the shows.
The cassette.
And
yeah, for our listeners who don't know, that this is a fossil. It's a cassette. We'll have to do a visual.
And when I call the number, Gwen Stefani picks up the phone, and I was just saying, I think your band's awesome. And we just chatted for a long time. And then so they kind of knew of me, because one time I think I went to Gwen's work at the Broadway because I was going to try and hit on her. And then I look across the counter and I saw Tony Canal. He was also working at the Broadway. And I'm like, oh, that's her boyfriend. Shit. Okay. I probably don't want to go down this path. So anyway, it gets pretty incestuous after a while. But I was just constantly going to shows and hanging out. And so they kind of knew of me. But I had only been playing drums about a year and a half when Chris Webb was leaving the band. And so I was one of probably 6 or 8 people that auditioned. And when they asked me how long I had been playing, I said I'd been playing for 8 years or some made up number.
Decades.
And but man, I knew that demo tape like my life depended on it. I knew it really well. And I was the guy. And that was in 1989. And to be transparent, when we started rehearsing, it became really apparent to them that, oh, whoa, this guy, he's got a ways to go. Because everyone else in the band was really, really solid at their instrument. And I had style, and I knew the songs I knew, and that was about it. And it took me a long time to catch up, to be honest. Yeah.
Well, I mean, they'd also been playing together, so I'm sure they were probably tight and familiar with themselves. You know what I mean? You're kind of the new guy.
Yeah, well, they also had been playing their instruments for more than a year and a half.
Yeah. They're like, we didn't ask how long you owned a drum kit. We asked how long you've been playing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was on a crash course for sure.
Yeah, sometimes you got to fake it till you make it.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I did.
And it's worked out all right. See?
Yeah, it did. But Daniel, going back to you, so you said, you were really inspired. You started wanting to make these custom drums, but you actually started working in retail. What were some of the shops you actually started working at?
I only worked in one shop, and it was called West Coast Drum. And they were the largest drum store on the West Coast. Like west of the Mississippi, they were the biggest place. They were in Santa Ana, in Orange County. And in the back, they also had a repair and somewhat of a custom shop. And when I was going there all the time, it was like my Disneyland of things. I mean, they had a million drum kits, and I mean, they had, most like music stores just have a couple of crappy little, like a Kima kit or a CB700. Maybe they have one nice drum kit, but I mean, this place had, 100 really nice drum kits, and they had, thousands of cymbals and, a couple hundred snare drums, and, you could get, I mean, it was great. It was a drummer's paradise.
What years was that for you?
Well, I was 15, so we'd have to do the math on it, but it's probably not my, my best skill, but God, it would have had to have been 87. 87, yeah, that would make sense. 87 would have been 87, 86.
And working at that shop, is that where you first met John Machado?
That is exactly where I met John. So when I started working there, they like I said, they had a repair and a somewhat of a custom shop, and John was the guy who was the main one there. And even though he was older than me, him and I hit it off. I was going to a ton of shows, and even though he was at least 15 years older than me, we just got through music. We had a lot of similarities and all that. That was fun. So even though I was younger, we could still have things to talk about, and I love the fact of working on stuff. And even as a kid, I had always done a lot of stuff with woodworking. My grandfather always had like a crazy wood shop of stuff and tools, and I really enjoyed building things. And I would like to get drums and redo them, and it was I loved taking an old drum and making it new again. And so John started teaching me about all the stuff of what they were doing. And I picked up on it, and I was like, hey, you ever think about doing this? Or how about doing that? You know what I mean? And it's like, no, we never did anything like that. And I'm like, well, is there a reason not to? He's like, no. And so we would try, and some things were a success. Some things were, a failure, but it was a come and go. And, at that point, metal was definitely up and a huge thing. And you would get a lot of, guys in bands that were doing pretty well. As a matter of fact, speaking of our drum teacher at the place, Joe, they used to call him Joe Z. His last name was Zairuha, so it was a lot easier just to call him Joe Z. He was Lars's drum teacher. Lars from Metallica, of course. And so Lars used to live somewhat in the area, and he had come here from Denmark and was a tennis guy. But Joe taught him from pretty much day one. And if you look in the liner notes, which most people don't have anymore, Lars always gives Joe, shout out to that. Joe is much older, obviously, but he's no longer with us. But Lars never forgot him, which I always thought was cool. Whenever Metallica would come into town, someone would call ahead and be like, hey, how busy is it over there right now? I'd be like, oh, it's not too bad. And, and then all of a sudden, Lars would show up to see Joe. And you could imagine at this point, it was probably like Master of Puppets era of Metallica, which was still, quite big. Wasn't Injustice for All or, the Black Album, but, Lars walks into a room full of drummers and Metallica's height at that point. And it was like, oh my God, especially to younger kids. But he would always come in and take care of everybody at the place and be like, make sure everybody was on the list for the shows and take care of Joe and give him plaques and stuff like that. So it was cool. It was a cool place. So, a cool place to work. And
it was a cool place to shop.
It was a cool place to shop. As a matter of fact, that's where I met Taylor Hawkins. Taylor lived in Laguna Beach in Orange County, and he would come up there, and we were the same age. So he was like, dude, how'd you get a job here? You know what I mean? It was cool. I was definitely by far the youngest guy in the building. And so, I'd met him, and he lived in Laguna, and I'd go down there. Ironically enough, Travis was a garbage man in Laguna Beach. And after he had moved out of the 909 and was working over there, and Taylor and Travis would see each other playing in, other bands around the area, and always checking like, dude, that guy's good, man. You should check, what I mean? And so, ironically, I just grew up in an area where I would meet people, and I worked at the drum place. So any drummer in the area was definitely going to West Coast Drum. Was that gone before you
Oh no, I shopped there quite a
At that,
bit.
okay,
'cause
with
that was the store.
original, yeah.
And I remember buying hardware off of John Machado at the counter
Yeah.
before I met you guys.
Yeah, yeah, okay. There you go. I mean, that would.
Mhm.
Okay.
They had moved a few locations, but the first,
Mhm.
the big one that was there. I mean, because even after they had moved along, we would actually sell drums through West Coast Drum later in
That's where
time.
I got my kit from. The first kit
Oh, really?
was West Coast Drum.
Yeah, no shit. There you go. Look at that.
But so what was the catalyst where you finally decided to open up your own retail shop, which would be most people refer to now as the Lake Forest location?
The Lake Forest. There was actually 2 Lake Forests.
Oh, okay.
There were 2 spots. My first neighbors really loved us. So that was always opening your own place to start with, lawsuits and, courtrooms were definitely not so much fun. So moving to the new location was definitely a lot more drummer friendly. Let's just say they didn't complain about people making noise. So what inspired from that? The owner of West Coast Drums and I, we had a disagreement on things, and John and I had always talked about wanting to do more. I mean, West Coast Drums was cool. No one was particularly a huge fan of the owner. Most people thought Joe owned the place because
I did.
Everybody thought Joe owned the place, and it was his heart and soul, but he did not own the place. And a lot of people had, issues with the with the owner, and I mean, ironically enough, not to get dark, but somebody killed him, and
really?
Shit.
yes, it was. So
wow. You did not see
let's
that
ju-
one coming.
let's
I did
just
not.
say-
I didn't either.
It's now a true crime podcast.
let's just say
I'm learning new things here.
let's just say I was not alone in we did not get along with things. He definitely was not. I hate that it sounds so. And the unfortunate, there was an unfortunate on that, is that our Tama rep, who was a great guy, who unfortunately, wife and 8 kids, happened to be there and got killed at the same thing, which was pretty horrible. Matter of fact, you want to talk about how things
This was in the shop?
No, this was at his house. But ironically enough, if you want to know how slight things in life can really alter your existence,
Yeah.
the guy that replaced me is the guy who killed him. So, mind you, if him and I had not had our disagreement, I would not have left. That guy would not have been hired, and he would still be alive today. So it all has life has a way of making things.
I didn't know any of that. Wow.
It's an interesting story. Yeah,
What a story.
yeah. Literally, when him and I were like, I was like, hey, then okay, well, cool. He's like, well, I don't know if I can keep you, and I'm like, okay, well, I don't know if I want to stay. So I think we'll go. And that guy happened to be in the store, and he's like, oh, well, you got a job opening? I'd love to do it. The guy was shady looking. I mean, he looked very white, trashy, methy, pretty much everything he was. And that eventually Bob, who was the owner, he had this huge house in the Anaheim Hills and was working on it. And this guy who eventually ended up killing him was like, oh, I can, work on your house and do all this stuff. And I have these friends. So they'd be there. And of course, they saw all the things that were in the place. And he would go out, the reps would come in. I mean, this was the 80s. And, Bob would put in these huge orders with all these guys, and these guys would take him out to lunch and, stroke him to, get all this stuff, get him all, oh, Bob, you're the best, and do that and take him anywhere he wanted to go for lunch. And he'd been doing all this work on the house. And of course, working there, the guy knew when Bob was leaving. He was like, okay, he's going to lunch with the Tama guy. They'll be gone for at least 3 hours because this is how it always works. And they were supposed to go after lunch. And at the last minute, he's like, hey, why don't we just go by my house first? And they did, and they walked in, and there was everybody stealing stuff out of the house. and they shot him on site, and then they tied up the Tama guy and made him beg for his life, and then killed him. Real charmers. It was definitely a dark story, but he
And they all got caught.
no, not at all. To this day, still not caught.
Not even the guy that was working at the shop?
No, he was the ringleader. He was the guy named Blaze. So
Whoa,
it was good.
wait a minute.
Yeah.
So was he ever questioned, brought in for
Oh
questioning?
no, he disappeared. I mean, literally. Of course, the cops were going to come and talk to us. I mean, John and I had worked there. I mean, John
So
had
they
worked
did
there
talk
way
to
long.
you?
Of course. And so the guy comes in, and I go, "Well, I guess I wonder what you're here for." And he's like, "So got to ask." He's like, "Do you know anybody?" I go, "Nobody liked him." He's like, so he's like, like nobody liked Bob. I go, "Do I know anybody who didn't like him enough to kill him?" No. And he's like, the cop goes, "It's the exact answer I've gotten from the other 20 people I've interviewed is exactly pretty much word for word what you've told me, that nobody liked the guy. He was a horrible dude. And, but not bad enough that anybody
How do
would
you
wanna kill
know
him."
that guy is the guy who did it?
Oh, I mean, it was, I don't know, when you leave for lunch, go kill the boss and then never come back again. It's kind of a sure sign that
So he just
Yeah.
disappeared. He's
Disappeared.
disappeared ever since.
never to be found.
Wow.
I mean, I knew, the people who took on, West Coast after that. We went to his brother, and then his brother's son had taken over the company and all that. But I mean, we dealt with them for decades after, and yeah, no one ever.
Wow.
No one. It's before the internet and everybody having a camera and a video ring
Yeah.
thing in your house. I mean, yeah. I mean, I think maybe one of like the 5 guys got caught and of course squealed to try to get out of, everything, but nobody ever caught any of those guys except maybe one of them, and he's the one who turned on everybody else, but no one was ever caught. So,
Yeah, stay tuned for our spinoff of Unsolved Mysteries.
yeah, right.
So,
Yeah, exactly. You're like, man, this took a strange turn to.
True crime is very popular.
It
though,
is
so
very
there you
popular.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My mother watches it all the time. So if you're women in your 80s, you're gonna love this episode.
But you were gone at that point. You started Orange County.
Well, yeah. So at that point, it kind of moved up our plan. Like I always wanted to have a place, and we had talked about it, and it was like, well, I now was out of there earlier, probably a year or so earlier than I would have planned on, starting this deal, and got into it. And we wanted to have a place that had retail, but was more heavy into repairs and custom stuff, and more than just being a retail place. And it was going to be in South Orange County, which that was pretty deep then. Now you live in Orange County. I mean, when I first moved to Orange County as a kid, people were like, "Where do you live?" You know what I mean? No one heard of like, "Oh, behind the orange curtain." No, man, no one will ever go there. And well, it certainly has changed that reputation since then. But yeah, I mean, there was a ton of drummers on that side of Orange County versus, Santa Ana. It was a much nicer area. And, you were definitely going to get your moms who were going to come in to take their kids to drum lessons and buy them drums and stuff like that would rather be in, Lake Forest, Irvine area than going into Santa Ana, especially at that time, and get stuff. So that's where that originally started. That's where the name, I mean, it was a retail place called, the reason it was Orange County Drum and Percussion is because, well, it was in Orange County and we sold drums and percussion. So, I mean, if I had originally just been thinking, hey, I'm going to start a drum company on its own, it would have never been named that. Do you know what I mean? The name came because of what it was. And then by the time,
What time did you open that or what year did you open
91.
the retail? 91?
91.
So, Adrian, when did you first hear about Orange County?
I think we had played a show and Daniel came up to me and said, "Hey, I want to make you a snare drum."
The famous line.
What year was that? 92.
92. Yeah, I mean, just say you had to be 92. And my roommate at the time, Chris.
It was that snare drum.
Yeah. He knew your guitar player, Tom. And I was like, hey, and they were huge No Doubt fans. And they were like, man, that drummer, you guys really should, get him. And I was like, oh, well, tell your guy I would love to, do something with him. And then Adrian called me and I went down and we met each other. And then he came down to the shop and we went through all kinds of colors and sounds and sizes. And that's where that drum started. Before that, you were playing a piccolo because you were going for a high pitched. If you don't remember, I remember the drum you were playing. No, it was a DW with purple sparkle and gold hardware. And
that thing that's like a 5-inch.
No, it was skinnier than that. Yeah,
I still have it.
I'm sure you do.
Oh.
You go grab yourself a tape measure and
I'll send you a text.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we'll see. You go with that. I'm willing to say
the one time in my life I might be able to prove him wrong on something related to drums.
We'll
find
see.
out.
Maybe.
We'll see. It's been a bit. It's been a few years, but it was years. But yeah, I'm saying I'm calling 4x14, gold hardware, purple sparkle.
Yeah.
So around that time, what was No Doubt doing when Daniel approached you and was like, "Hey, I want to make you a snare"?
We had already put out our first record, and toured it, and we had already started recording Tragic Kingdom, and so by the time this was built, most of the record was done, and the last song to be tracked was Spiderwebs,
Yep.
and I used that, and that's what that drum pokes through that mix in its own way. And I remember that the engineers or somebody was like, "I don't know if this is the right thing, It's kind of no. This is what we're doing." Can you imagine that song now with a fucking Black Beauty or some fat rock snare on it? Like,
yeah,
no.
I mean, it was funny because the reason, like I said, his snare drum. And, he'd be cranking it like most people did to get a higher pitch for that. And I'm like, hey, why don't we go with something smaller yet deeper? And you can get the higher pitch without having to, bottom out onto a skinny, bigger drum. We could do that, and we'll have the thicker shell. And it seemed to work and became his signature sound.
Being that's 7 inches deep, like it's got way more meat than a piccolo.
Right. That's exactly,
Yeah. No, totally.
Then you got to remember, now you see 12s and 10s and stuff like that.
I don't know anybody that was playing something
Back
like that.
in the day, those things were, a unicorn. You didn't come across that. The only 12 I remember any company even making was Pearl had one. They called it a soprano, and but that was a rarity. You didn't see anybody play it, but it was actually like in the catalog.
Well, also, how did you even get the parts for it?
That's another thing. That is, now you can get hoops, you can get snare wires. That back in that time, we were doing 8s, 10s, and 12s. We had to make our own snare wires, and there was Remo would get us the snare heads. They would do it, getting the rims themselves. And if you notice, that's an 8 lug, not a 6. Now, most of your, except like Gretsch, are 6 lug, 6 lug Tom, where Gretsch has a 5 and had it weird. But to get an 8 lug 12 in 92 was far more difficult. So, but I like the fact here again, I didn't want it to have to be cranked so hard with less tension. I wanted to be able to have some body and some, you could go up, you could go down. It wasn't like this is it and here's your sound. Crank it till you can stop turning it and there you go. So, I wanted to go with more lugs on it, and I was a fan of the 8 lug 12.
Right on. So Adrian, what were your thoughts when you actually got this drum? Was it like, wow, this is finally my sound, or was that something you maybe had in your head, or it just fit the music?
All of it. Yeah, it was instantly, this is the shit. it made it easier for me to play. And I'm mostly self-taught, and so back then my rudiments were kind of poor, and I could kind of cheat ghost notes easier, which because I did a lot of cheating back then. It was so responsive, and it was perfect. Yeah, and I played it. It was my main snare for years and years and years. In fact, when we went to do an arena tour on Tragic Kingdom, you guys built the Orange Sparkle drum set and a matching Orange Sparkle snare drum it's exactly that size, which has been missing.
I was just gonna say, go ahead, tell them.
It's been missing for like 20 years. So if anybody's listening to this, there's a 7x12 Orange Sparkle O.C.D.P snare drum. It's my fucking snare drum.
It's definitely.
You could call these guys at the Vintage Snare if you want to return it.
Sorry, the Rolodex is going. I'm just thinking that
There are drums like that have come and gone missing that I'm always surprised never showed back up once things got bigger. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Where like somebody eventually would put it on for sale. I mean, a funny one. When Travis had just joined Blink, he from the Aquabats, he needed a bigger drum kit because he was playing in both bands. So he had the green Sparkle small kit. And when he was Blink, we needed to go up bigger. So we went with a 12, 22, 16. And another rarity on that one was a 12 lug 20 ply as far as the snare drum goes. And, he was hanging out with Brain from Primus at that time. And Brain was all about the 12 lug. So Travis was like, oh man, I want to try one of those. But to go back to what the story is Blink was playing this, it was an X Games after party in San Diego, and we all went down for it. And it was a gold Sparkle drum kit. And the end of the night, they like all their gear had come there in a van, right? The next day, Travis hits me up. He's like, hey, by any chance, did you take my bass drum home? And I'm like, why would I take your bass drum home? And he's like, yeah, I was afraid you were going to say that. He's like, yeah, they didn't pack up my bass drum. My bass drum's gone now. And the place didn't have it. And so, which is ironic because that's what started that Jelly Bean kit of his that you'd see like in What's My Age Again. But that bass drum never showed back up. And I mean, you would think after all this time and all that, someone would have tried to capitalize on the fact that it was actually Travis's bass drum. And it was that to try to sell it and make some money, but never showed up, never was found again. And either was that 12 lug snare, that 12 lug 20 ply has never materialized anywhere in the universe again either. Kind of funny.
I will keep my eyes peeled. I mean, there was that one funny one. It was a couple, I guess this would have been 2012, something in that realm. Craigslist was still really big where you can kind of get these big scores off of there. And I was on tour and I saw in Arizona somebody had an all brass kit, but it was really, really messed up. And I was like,
that was Taylor's kit.
I only learned later that it was the stolen kit that Taylor had, and I just passed on it because I'm like, this thing's a fucking rust bucket. It's out there in Arizona. I'm like, I don't have time or the energy to want to make it look nice. And then,
yeah, his drum tech at the time, who was taking care of him and Dave, because when they were touring at that point during the Color and the Shape, Dave and Taylor had matching brass O.C.D.P kits. They were in different sizes, but they were both the same color. They were 20 by 24 inch bass drums. Dave's was a 15 by 15 inch rack and an 18 by 18 inch floor and a 10 by 14 inch snare. And Taylor's was a 8 by 12 inch rack, 16 by 16, 18 by 18. And like I said, they both had 20 by 24 inch that. Taylor had a few different snare drums ranging from 6 to 7 in different, some vented, some 20 ply solids, like 7 by 14s and stuff like that. And the guy they had as a drum tech was a total dumpster pile. So, I mean, yeah, he ended up taking both of those drum kits and like selling them for like next to nothing for
For a
drugs
bag,
out on
yeah.
the open market.
Oh,
And so those drum kits were gone. But I somebody who actually ended up buying the Taylor kit ended up hitting me up on. I get hit up on Instagram by a lot of people and asking me, "Hey, is this real? Is this not?" And I'll try to help people out. And I mean, as soon as she's like, "Hey, do you know anything about this kit?" I'm like, "I know everything about that kit." And like ended up getting it for like $700. I mean, when you're trying to buy meth in Arizona, you're $800, I guess, will get you a lot of meth. So he did that. It's some guy, last I had heard, who doesn't even realize what he has. He has Dave Grohl's kit like in Van Nuys. The Dave Grohl version of that from the Color and the Shape tour.
there's a thread or a common theme going on here with the drums and crime.
Yes.
Yeah.
This podcast.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Nobody got killed as far as I know in this stuff.
Just
Those
seeing-
drums are just sold.
seeing a
Though
pattern.
though the drum tech is dead.
There we go.
There's you
Yeah.
wanted your unit crime. So bands tend to get a storage unit to put their gear in, which is always, I don't know if you ever look at the guy behind the counter at the storage unit, probably not not the shadiest.
I've been a victim of this.
Yes. So they end up doing it. The guy, of course, sees what people are bringing in. He has friends that are, shadier than him. And they end up doing it. I don't know if you remember the band At the Drive-In. So Tony, who was drummer, Tony Ajar, they had all their stuff in a storage unit. And of course, lost everything. Another one was the Deftones. They had as you remember, as you started moving up the ranks in your band, you got the bus, and you got a bus with a trailer. You could even put your stuff in it. And they were on tour, and they had, thought they had, backed up their thing enough. And of course, somebody in some, dumpy hotel, because, at that point, you're just stoked to have hotels when you're touring, and, you're not staying at the Ritz-Carlton. So, you're at the Motel 6 and, Blythe. There's definitely some less than.
Did they get Abe's orange OC kit?
Yeah, no, not the orange kit. His white marine pearl one.
Oh.
Yeah, that kit and all of the Deftones gear. But yes, they did. They did get that one. Abe still has the orange kit.
Oh, cool.
I just saw him recently, and we were discussing it.
I was telling these gentlemen earlier that that Return of Saturn tour,
Yep.
white sparkle abalone,
Yep.
custom paint
Lacquered.
job.
Yeah.
My rack toms were stolen out of my storage unit like 3-4 years ago.
Damn, really?
Yeah.
I'm assuming but here again, were they ever found?
No.
Okay, you've got
Not
two.
yet.
You've got two weird.
Not yet.
Okay, you've got two weird rack toms that match nothing. I mean,
Yeah.
because it's a paint job, and it wasn't like black. It wasn't white. I mean, you would think, hey, those are weird. Those toms don't match anything in your kit, or somebody trying to sell it. Especially things went up. I mean, hey, No Doubt, fucking back doing the Spear. Hey, you want to buy some No Doubt, memorabilia?
Yeah.
Right here, some real rack toms. If you're a true fan, here's some.
It's now been made known. So if they pop up,
Well, I mean, let's put it this way. I guarantee you the guy who stole them doesn't have them. It's like the guy who has the brass, kit from
Taylor.
from
yeah.
Taylor is not the. He's actually in a band. You ever heard of a band called Scary Kids Scaring Kids?
yeah.
Yeah, the singer passed away not too long ago, right?
Okay,
Something
well,
like that.
not the original drummer, but the guy who was playing drums, and that they were gone for a while, and they started playing, and the guy had hit me up, and he was like, "Hey, do you know about getting a logo head?" So I sent him on where he could get the stuff, but that's
He's playing that kit.
he was playing that kit for quite a while, yeah. Ironically enough, I was Shane Hawkins, Taylor's son. I was hanging out with him at it's 606, which is the Foo Fighters studio up in LA, and we were doing rehearsals for the Taylor tribute in London, and Shane's a big O.C.D.P fan, and he wanted to know all about his dad's brass kit, and we were talking and going through the whole thing, and I'm like, I mean, if you want, I'm like, I actually know a guy. I think he still has it. You know what I mean? Maybe, could convince him to, get the kid back to at least in the family. You know what I mean? But yeah, I don't think the guy from Scary Kids has it anymore, and it had gotten moved along. And the guy we had tried to hit it up, I didn't want to. He knew what it was, and he wasn't. He wasn't interested in getting rid of it at the time.
That's lame. But
There's always a number.
There's always a number.
Is that-
There is. There is.
yeah,
There's always a number.
we'll see it in the comments section.
Yeah.
Right. But so like going back, so when did you decide to close the retail shop and then move operations to the infamous garage?
The garage. So I mean, at that point, most of 80% of the business coming in there was for custom drums and hot rodding and doing all that. So when you're a retail store, when you are an actual official dealer for a company, we'll use Tama, Pearl, Ludwig, any of these things, you have to buy so many drums per year and all of different levels, from your Tama Rockstar all the way up to an Art Star. And you have to buy so many of them in each level. And the thing is that for us to keep buying these drums, anybody who was spending that kind of money at that point was coming to us and wanting us to build them something, custom and cool. So for us to keep having to buy these expensive drum kits from other companies, they weren't, it wasn't really selling for us. So we would be sitting on all this, would take all this money, and it didn't really ever turn around. So it'd be a profit where, most of our time was spent, like I said, building custom drums and, hot rodding people's stuff. And so eventually it was like, hey, we could do this. Since we don't need people, we don't need foot traffic, we could do this. And my turn my 3-car garage into a shop. And I mean, my whole house was the home for wayward boys of the drum world, and it was definitely quite a time. I mean, it was like a drum fraternity house of stuff. It was it ran 24 hours a day. It was different people and different shifts of different stuff, and it was quite a time. 95 to 2005 was quite a 10-year, quite a time of
yeah, totally. Adrian, when did you finally decide to take the plunge and ask Daniel to make you a kit?
I think it was probably the next year after this, or maybe even less than a year. It was that green sparkle drum set.
I was gonna say, I mean, you guys were out of the van and into buses, and the first single had really taken off. I mean, Just a Girl had started booming, and Spider Webs, and it was definitely
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Where was that green sparkle kit built?
In the
retail
garage.
shop? In the garage.
In the garage.
Cool
Yeah.
stuff.
And
Yeah.
that kit is currently, it sits in my recording studio.
Still being
That's
used.
the one.
Oh yeah.
That's
Oh, yeah.
awesome.
So yeah, I mean, it was a great time. I mean, that green kit. I mean, green kit saw a lot of action.
Oh yeah.
Still does.
Oh,
But I
yeah.
mean, it.
If you saw it, you'd be like, would you fucking dust that thing off at a minimum?
I mean, everybody's got their thing. I'm obsessive compulsive about cleanliness, shininess, and everything. And then there are people who don't mind. So,
Hey, when were you already in the house when I became a partner with the company?
Yes.
You were in the house.
Oh, yeah.
What year was that?
Well, I mean, No Doubt was definitely a household name by that point.
So it was 96?
96, 97, beginning of 97.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely around that time for sure. I mean, No Doubt was definitely everywhere. I mean, yeah, I don't know if you'd gotten the place in Naples yet, but it was, what year did you get that house?
96.
96. So it was definitely like that. So it would have been 96.
And why did you decide to become a partner?
Well, I was going down to the house and just hanging out socially often.
I mean, like wasn't
Yeah. That was the
uncommon.
hang?
It wasn't uncommon for
It
a
was
lot
a
of people
fun.
to
It was
come
a
in.
fun party house.
Yeah, it was a fun. I mean,
And yeah, drink beer and talk about drums.
yeah,
What else could you want?
yeah. I mean,
So
there was always somebody. There was always something going, so you could come
Yeah.
by. And
So
it
you
was,
gave him beer money.
you
Got it.
I mean, the door was never locked. I don't even have a key to the house. I mean, it was always, there was always somebody doing something. So it was
he lived at the end of a
cul-de-sac.
and I had this old 1970 Cadillac
Yep.
that I stored there
Yeah.
at one point.
Yeah,
It was
you were on tour and you're like, dude, I got no place to put this. I'm like, stick it on the
Yeah.
end of the thing. My neighbors loved us. They definitely had no idea what the hell was going on over there. Like, it'd be funny, you think those big long hardware bags, that were like 6 feet long. You'd see us carrying something out in the middle of the night, look like a body. Neighbors are like, I saw nothing. Just go back into there. It was definitely a time. I mean,
it was a friendship.
yeah.
Before a partnership is what it really
Gotcha.
was.
So
Yeah.
like the sound and everything else was just like an added bonus. It was more just the relationship you guys had and friendship.
Yeah, we were
Yeah.
all buddies, and I think that it became obvious to them, and then to me, that like if there was an influx of money, they could do more. They could get more machinery
Sure.
in the house and be able to build more drums.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely the next thing that had to, we had a reputation and we had that, but, obviously capital always helps you move along to whatever you're doing. So, getting, more machinery, better machinery, having more people, you could get more accomplished.
So who were you like building drums for at that time? Like, were you still getting some art? Like, what?
Oh, God, I mean,
artist
that's-
wise, or was it just kind of the word of mouth? Somebody would just call you and say, "Hey."
Well, so you got to remember, this is, before, people didn't have, there was no social media at that point, really, you know what I mean? It
Yeah.
was, so, I mean, if you got an ad in a,
We didn't even have cell phones.
Yeah, cell phones.
Mhm.
Pagers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, if you did have a cell phone, it costs you your rent to talk on it. So you better be calling to save your life if you're making it. So, yeah, I mean, all the biggest guys, all of it really, we were building stuff for everybody out of that. I mean, like I said, all of Adrian's kits after that. I mean, we were doing the Deftones and No Effects and the Foo
311.
Fighters, 311. I mean, 311 we had started back actually in the shop. The green, I don't know if you guys ever seen the green alien kit, green lacquered. That one was actually built at the Lake Forest shop.
Oh,
So
that was like the first one.
That was the first one, and that was that. Everything after that was built in the garage, as far as that goes. I mean, we were doing
Sugar Ray.
fucking Newfound Glory. Yeah, I mean, we were making kits for everybody. I mean, all these guys would go out, people would see their stuff and be like, "Oh, damn, look at that!" You know what I mean? And they had a boring drum kit. And they were like, well, shit, I want something like that. And then, it was one of these things like, oh, I'll give you Daniel's number. And, because like I said, there weren't, websites and all this other stuff. So it was like, it was a word of mouth, like Cool Guy Club. You know what I mean? It was like, hey, if you had the hookup and, you could do it, and we would, I mean.
And you would start with the snare. If you got the call, you knew who they were. It was like, let's start with the snare.
Let's start with the snare. Like, I mean, it's like, what are you using now? And what are you looking for? What are you unhappy with? What are your, I'd look at the band, look at the, the vibe, and, I'd try to give them, my opinions of what they should go with. And then there were some people that definitely had their own idea that this is what I want. And, it would go from there. But I mean, like I said, everybody and their mother was definitely, and it was funny because so many people couldn't figure out, who we were. I mean, you see a No Doubt video, or you would see, 311 video and stuff like that, back when MTV actually played music and was, well, now still actually existed. You'd see the logo, but people didn't know what the hell it was. And then you'd start seeing it on all these other things. And then, Blink broke. And then, small things. And What's My Age Again were all, on TRL and all that. And it was a killer shot of the logo. And it was like, okay, so all these people were trying to, I don't know if you noticed at that point, every other drum company was starting to get a elliptical, logo. Anything they could do to confuse the public of what it was. You know what I mean? Because it was, like I said, it was more of a word of mouth amongst, people. And it, then finally we, had some money to do some advertising, which would help. I don't know if you guys ever saw the Snap, Crackle, and Pop. We got the cease and desist. Ironically enough, we ran that in Drum Magazine and Modern Drummer, had no problems. It was his punk rock golf magazine, Schwing, if I remember correctly, and it was in the Schwing full page ad in that somebody from Kellogg's was like, "What the hell is this?" And
I have the big, huge foam board ad mat
oh, really?
in my bar. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, we got a lot of attention off that, and I mean, the fact that obviously we knew what we were doing wasn't.
Yeah, we anticipated that.
Yeah, we anticipated. Yeah, but the fact is that none of these. You gotta remember how stale and corporate all these other drum companies were. You know what I mean? They were never gonna do something like that. So it was the same way we did everything. I mean, it was not the norm of the time. It was like it would blow people's minds. You know what I mean? And it would be like, whoa. When we were going to the NAMM show and stuff like that, it was crazy times. I mean, we had weird stuff that nobody else around there had. But of course, everybody eventually would come over to see what we would do so they could steal it for the next year for them. And, it would, we had all these big bands, and yet we still didn't have we only had in comparison to you're looking at any of the major giant multi-million-dollar corporations had these ginormous booths. Our booth was like 8x8 or 16x8 or what I mean at the time. But yet we had like all the hottest drummers in town were all coming by and hanging out and playing the stuff. I mean, we weren't trying to keep everything. It wasn't the 11 herbs and spices. We weren't but it was ideas of things that didn't exist before. I mean, hollow body vented snare drums didn't exist before. You know what I mean? It was like, okay, Ludwig had a slotted Coliseum, which would be maybe the predecessor to the vented snare drum. But I mean, that was a pretty one-trick pony. It had to be a certain size. It had to have a certain sound. Where my concept was you could get that kind of vibe, but you could make it in different sizes. You could use different size holes. You could use different plies of wood. And I mean, go back before us. I mean, you didn't see plies of, getting crazy thick plies of shells, when we were doing all that. I mean, that was unheard of at that point, and now it's an industry standard, you know what I mean? Everybody.
My second snare drum, or maybe the third one, was a straight 20 ply.
Yeah.
Wow. Was that a 13-inch snare drum?
13.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The story I've heard is that when John saw you guys putting a 20-ply shell together, he was laughing, saying like, what are you guys doing? Like, this is fucking stupid.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, the one thing, okay, like John, like I was, the idea guy, and I would come up with crazy things, and John was good at getting a way for me to accomplish what my thought was. And he had a brother who was an engineer and a machinist. So it was like, I want to do this and I want to make it. But, obviously making, like I said, at that point, you couldn't order shells like that. We had to make all these thick, shells. And it was a ton of labor. And, and it was, it definitely was not fast. So like it was like, okay, we need a machine that can assist us in this thing to do that. And he was really good at putting that kind of, spin to the company, where, I was the guy who would go and find bands and, I had ideas and stuff like that to my creative ideas of, what I wanted to do. I mean, certain things came out of, like the, which, now see on everybody, but try to find one before we did it, was the wood block attached to the bass drum hoop. That you find one of those before us, and I'll, you can send it to me, because but that came from that came from Travis had this. It was like a goldy ambery acrylic drum kit with gold hardware, and the bass drum hoops were wrapped in real metal. He had a tendency to hit it, and of course, as we were discussing here, dents and things like that, I just can't deal with things. Like it would drive me crazy. So the idea was, hey, you're trying to get a sound off of that and you're damaging the drum on top of it. How about I come up with a way to bring the block towards it so your hand hits better. You have a sound that's actually good versus just banging on your rim. And so we invented the block that actually attached to the bass drum, and it took off. A lot of people, after that, certainly, as you see now, you won't have any problem finding somebody who wanted to do that. The wider front bass drum hoop, I don't remember anybody doing that prior to us on that.
Oh, lots of firsts.
The vented snares, I mean, obviously, the thicker shells, the vents, the hollow bodies, the blocks, the double wide rims, stuff like that.
Yeah.
He made me, I guess it was you and John made me a 13 top, 14 bottom.
Yes, yes, there was those too. Yeah. So, I mean, you didn't.
Was that the first one?
Yes. Yeah, that one. And, so then the different plies of how it was a 30 ply top into a 20 ply bottom, and then the vents. And then you do the opposite version of that with the skinny. You have the 13 into a 14. We did those. We did some. Like I said, I wish I had brought. I wish I had brought some drums to show. We'll do another one that had the channel in the inside. That the tops were, 14, but it would gut out in the middle down to a 13, so it would have the inside of the shell would hang over with the tube lugs. Easier to show than it is to describe, but it was, but it was cool.
So your light up kit, we talk about, you having some of the most iconic kits out there. How did that come about? Was that just like a creativity from like Daniel's side, or were you just inspired that?
So that was in 2002, and I don't remember how the idea came about.
Yeah, I don't remember how that really came about either. I mean, they were definitely, No Doubt always had a look, you know what I mean? So you guys, every album had
maybe 2001.
Yeah, I mean, had a vibe, and you guys had elaborate production and everything by that point. I mean, you guys were massive by that point in the game. And it was like, what could we do to really draw attention to to him, and that we hadn't done yet, and that would, change the game. And making the drum kit, we were, working with acrylic all the time, and then we started frosting it. And then it was like, we were working on something, and I, put the light down on it to, check an edge. It was like, look at that. Look how cool that looks when it lights up when you put that over there. And then here again, it was like, okay, how do we do this so we can make this work and run? And then that's where it was. And
was it John Machado?
Yeah, I mean, he was when it came with how to mount it. Yeah,
okay.
How to do that. I mean, so it was like, hey, how do we make these drums light up, but we can still do it, and it won't break, and it won't sound like shit? How can we go about? We're going to need to, isolate the mount from the shell so we can still get vibration and, do the whole deal. And then it was like, okay, it was time for him to get a new drum kit. It was like, what do you think about this? And then, I had the jelly bean, he was all over the jelly bean thing. And like I said, I mean, everybody else a lot of it was very white, wasn't it? The rest of the look of the stage.
That was later. That was 2009.
2009, okay. But I mean, that kit popped. I mean, when you,
oh yeah,
as soon as you guys were playing,
especially on TV, man, that thing was crazy.
Is that the one you used on the Super Bowl, right?
Jeez, I don't remember.
I think
it was that time period. So
yeah,
probably.
it was.
But also because the only reason I'm asking was, wasn't it? Did Josh Freese cover something because your son was going to be born?
Yeah. So the year before we played the halftime show, we were scheduled to play in Jackson Square for Super Bowl week.
Okay.
On MTV, and I didn't go, so I asked Josh to go for me.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
I don't know what kit that was, but
I'm sure it was still probably the jelly bean kit. I mean, that was such a
I think that's
part
the
of your guys'
photographed one.
by
you've seen
the
with.
way, I watched that from my couch. That performance, that was a weird experience to watch my band from my couch at home.
Oh, I
was
could imagine.
Fucking really weird. It was cool and weird at the same time. But the lights in that drum set were actually the like old school original LED screw-in bulbs.
Yeah.
And the power was like just from the hardware store. It was just daisy chain
Out of
Yeah.
an air vent.
Yeah. Through air vents, right? Like that to make it. But, here again, it sounded good. It was very dramatic. You know what I mean? As soon as, as soon as that drum kit popped up, you'd hear everybody go, oh, well, you go to see that in an arena. And I mean, I remember being in the crowd watching people's reaction because I was ready. I knew what was coming. And I wanted to see what everybody else's reaction was to it. And the second that thing, we kind of people, whoa, you know what I mean? It was.
and there was no programming at this point. It was either on or off.
Nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
It's either plug it in or
You plug
unplug
it in.
it.
Well,
Yeah, I mean-
like you guys said, there was no real acrylic drums. Were still kind of just making a comeback. No one
Yeah.
was doing frosted, let alone
Yeah,
who
exactly.
Who would like? I'm sure the other company's like, now who the fuck is gonna put a light bulb in a drum kit?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Right.
And, but, here we were. And that definitely, his kit was definitely, the jelly bean light up kits was a massive success on that. People really liked it. The only other one that came comparable to that was John Otto's, which was it was a clear acrylic shell that was blue lacquer painted, transparent blue lacquer painted. And then there were the Limp Bizkit, like it's this 3-circle like tree logo that they use. And those would be, there would be, we'd put down a vinyl deal, then you'd paint over it, that would remove. And so it was fogged, a blasted white. It looked white because you take the acrylic and once you frosted it, it would make it, a white one. And then the transparent blue. So it had these, the Limp Bizkit trees on this big giant double bass kit. And it had chrome hardware. And then the B rig was a transparent acrylic kit with all blue, transparent hardware on it. So it looked like blue chrome. And then there were like big blue chrome trees on it. So it was like the opposite of each other. So they had the A and the B rigs of that. But the blue one lit up and it went with their whole giant stage deal. And the same thing, as soon as that kit went on, people were like, whoa, it was, it definitely, the crowd would definitely get a roar out of it.
Well, I mean, the first time seeing Adrian's, it was like, wait, you can have cool looking drums and they actually sound like drums. It's just not a novelty.
Right. It wasn't exactly. It wasn't a, playing at a bit of fake, kind of, you know what I mean? Where, a lot of that stuff, would be if you were just going for a novelty of a TV show or something like this. But this was something he could do every night and it still worked. And it was relatively inexpensive. You broke a bulb. I mean, you could replace it rather easy. It wasn't wasn't NASA to make it happen, but the look like it had gone to the, you definitely looked like you had gone to another planet for it. But
You having the rider light bulbs?
light bulbs, yeah. Make sure there's
And there's 2 of them.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Right on. So actually, I just want to go back real quick. So Daniel, this one goes for you. Looking from the, like, an outsider's perspective, it always seemed like you were ahead of the curve, and you always kind of put together what would be called like a championship team. How did you know that, like, that guy, like, looking at Taylor, like, how did you know he was going to be a fucking rock star, or like, this is the guy, you know?
I definitely had a run of being able to pick the winning horses. There was no question. I could definitely.
Yeah, it seemed like you do no wrong.
I could see who the next future rock star was. It was a good time, man. I mean, like I said, it's a shame you don't really see that anymore. You know what I mean? That, you would go to, I mean, you remember like the Acoustic Christmas or the Weenie Roast or something like that. And you'd see all these massive bands all playing on the same bill, and you don't have those radio shows anymore and stuff like that. But I mean, we'd end up at, out here, K-Rock being the big alternative radio station, kind of set the vibe for the rest of the country's deal. It'd be 12 massive bands playing, and we'd have like 9 of them. You know what I mean? It was definitely, but we had got it before it took off. I mean,
But I want to interrupt. He was good at seeing a band kind of on their way up, even if they're playing tiny clubs, and being like, there's something going on here, and this drummer is cool. It has a thing. And, he really had a knack for that. It wasn't like, oh, this band's big, I'm going to try to worm my way in here. It was the opposite of that.
Yeah, it was before, like,
before they hit.
before their record.
Yeah, before they hit.
Exploded. Yeah, we were just like, how did you?
I
it's like,
built
how did you
relationships
know?
with these people before, the whole world wanted them. You know what I mean? It was like I saw something in them that I was like, hey, I like your stuff. I like your band. I like you as a drummer. I like what you're doing. And I was willing to take a shot on them. You know what I mean? Because it's like, all right, I was lucky. I was lucky. I was good at it. I definitely was lucky that a lot of my really good friends ended up becoming huge rock stars.
Oh yeah.
And it was, and we had a great relationship, and they would tell, or other big bands would be on tour with them and see them and be like, dude, I love that kid. And they would, pass along my information. And it was, it was far more of a community back then. You know what I mean? It was definitely, there was a ton of bands, a ton of drummers, and, people were, it was just a different vibe, at that point. The mid 90s to the mid 2000s it's a good time for, bands, drums, and
Yeah, totally.
everything like that. And I just, like I said, I had a knack for it, and I was lucky to be, if I had lived in the middle of Kentucky at that point, instead of in an area where there were a ton of bands and stuff like that, and
a lot of shows.
I mean, my friends and I, everybody from the house, we would go to shows anywhere from San Diego to San Francisco, out to Vegas, Arizona. I mean, if there was somebody that we were into and we thought was really cool, we would go and hit all of those shows that they were playing in the area or in the general area. But, I mean, we'd load up and head out, and it was fun. And we became friendly with the bands, their crew. And it was, I mean, some of my best friends still to this day, I still have all from all of that. It was definitely a good time, and a good time to be alive and be at the age I was to do all that. It was a lot of fun.
Adrian, did you ever call up Daniel and say, hey, you got to get this kid a set of drums or anything like that?
Nothing comes to mind.
Yeah, I mean, you were definitely on tour with people that you were like, dude, you heard this band or you see these guys? And I'm like, yeah.
My memory kind of sucks too. I'm going to think of something in about 20 minutes and I'll circle back to it.
But I mean, nonetheless, I mean, Adrian was a huge influence. I mean, it was like that. I mean, No Doubt was getting bigger all the time. And, here was a band out of Orange County. They were the local hero gone, worldwide. I mean, it wasn't like in this day and age, you're lucky if you got one single and one there and you're big for, a month on TikTok. I mean, No Doubt was, it was crazy. I mean, that went massive everywhere in the world. And I mean, they went to the four corners of the earth. And I mean, they had 4 or 5 big singles off of all of these albums. Now, I mean, 4 or 5 big singles off of 10 albums would be a big deal. I mean, and they were everywhere. I mean, No Doubt was doing all the giant award shows. They were all over MTV. And I mean, Adrian was definitely a character that everybody loved. You know what I mean? It was like, he was definitely getting a lot of attention. And,
I'm going to turn red.
I mean, his playing, his look, his everything about him, the drum kits were, as crazy and outrageous as his image and his playing. And it drew just as much attention to his playing, as, to a kit that went right along with his personality and his playing ability, and to a band that, like I said, went everywhere and did everything. And it was, awesome that we were, it was to be able to go along on that ride with them was a big deal. I mean, there's no doubt having, no pun intended, that, being a boutique drum company from Orange County, to have a band like that get that massive everywhere. I mean, there was no place in the world that did No Doubt. You know what I mean? It was, and then to continue to have successful album after successful album, to have successful album and having multiple singles off of each one of them, and to be all over, like I said, giant award shows, radio shows, everything. It was, from the Super Bowls to the Grammys to was a big deal. And I mean, that flying that logo definitely, showed the world who, it was. And obviously at that point there, which was, and with a lot of these guys, we were lucky to help them go up in their career, and they helped us, elevate our company into all this with, people who could have had anything, for a long time, and chose to stay with us and, do stuff. And as long as, we could, take care of the situation and try to, keep everybody, happy and going and giving them something that everybody else wasn't. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, looking from the business side of it, I mean, like you said, you were kind of on the same path as all the bands, their trajectory, they were just getting bigger and bigger. Like, I mean, Blink, huge. I mean, even today, Deftones are bigger than ever.
Deftones are bigger than ever. Yeah. I mean, you got Slipknot. I mean, Joey Jorgensen,
yeah.
Joey was, you kids were always, Joey would end up playing with a lot of other metal, he filled in for Metallica. He was doing Korn. He was doing that. He was kind of like, he was my metal, version. Kids would consider him like the metal version of Travis, where Travis would play with a bunch of different people in different genres and different stuff. But I mean, kids loved Joey. I mean, Joey was I remember getting a call from Clown from Slipknot, wanting to tell me about this 17-year-old kid who was going to be the next Dave Lombardo, is what he was telling me. The first Slipknot album hadn't come out yet. And he's trying to explain this to me. I'm like, so you guys are from Iowa, and there's 9 of you, and you're not a ska band, and you wear a bunch of masks? And I'm like, man, this guy's going to be really, really good, because I'm telling you, man, this is a hard sell right now. I'm like, and, he sent over, this is when people still had packs and demos and, shit like that. And I'm like, holy shit, listen to this kid's feet. You know what I mean? It was like, wow, and, without looking at them, it sounded, and I'm like, it's a crazy ass look. 9 guys in the band, it's going to be an expensive, it's like being in a ska band, and having, 9 or 10 guys and, 5 horn dudes. It's like the profit margin for individuals, not much to be had. But, we were with that for, before they took off, and, we were there with Slipknot for the first 3 albums, and, obviously a lot of people consider that some of their best work, what I mean? Joey's playing and all that. And, it was definitely, there's another one, Deftones. Funny as it was, I met Abe, you guys, no doubt, here again, opening a door to it. No Doubt was doing 2 nights at the Palladium in Hollywood. You guys had them sold out, and it was Real Big Fish, the Deftones, and No Doubt. It's very strange. This is like the Deftones' first album had just come out, and I know
we had just done the Warped Tour together before that,
and I knew your brother loved them. He was like, "Dude, you guys got to hear this Deftones band." He's like, "These guys are awesome. You're gonna love it." And another one of my friends, BC, who played in the band Head. I think you guys have had him on there.
He's the man.
And BC's great. I love the guy. He, the Deftones, they would come down and play like Korn, Deftones, and Head would all kind of play together. And wherever like they were more popular, they would bring, if you went up to Sacramento, obviously it was Deftones territory, and they would bring the other guys. If you were down in Orange County, Head or, Korn at that point would pull off, more people, and they'd all help each other out. But so they're like, dude, you got to check out this kid Abe in this band. So, we'd already had Real Big Fish, and we had No Doubt. And the middle band of the day was this band Deftones. So we were sitting around waiting for them to sound check so we could, check it out live. And we're like sitting there talking, and all of a sudden Chino just screams his head off, and we're all like, what the fuck is that? And then they started, and we're like, oh, this is awesome. And so Abe and I had talked afterwards, and we got going, and he's like, oh man, I'd love to, and we ended up getting him, and he had his first kit was the transparent tangerine orange colored drum kit. Mm-hmm. And that it was definitely, like I said, it was a good time. Those band was great. I love those guys. I couldn't be happier for their success. Mm-hmm. I run into them to this day all the time, and I'm really stoked that it's funny that it took 10 albums and all these years for them to be the hot new thing. But it's great for them, and
Yeah.
Thanks for watching part 1 of our Daniel and Adrian interview. Make sure to join us next week for part 2.
And don't forget to check out patreon.com/fullyventedpodcast for early access and exclusive bonus footage.